Here we go. Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Friction Log. Rick, it's good to be back. You and I talking about development tools. I think last time on our Postman episode, we were talking about the Cursor and some IDEs and whatnot, like some of the things that were included on the Postman extension. And you and I were talking. Off stage, and you were like, hey, you should spend more time with Cursor, and I was like, well, you should try to convince me. So today our episode is all about Cursor.sh, which is an IDE based out of VS Code, and Rick is going to try to sell it to me. But before we get into that, Rick, how are you? How's everything going on your end?
Good. Everything's great. I'm really excited about the AI World's Fair, AI Engineer World Fair in San Francisco in a couple weeks. So stoked about that. Hopefully we can do a couple episodes on some of the stuff there. But I think there's like 2,000 attendees now registered,
Okay.
so it's blown up, which is great. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're gonna bring more conference experiences, I guess is what we want to call it. I recently was at the Snowflake summit in San Francisco too, so we'll have something about that and something about the AI Engineer World's Fair. I need to learn
Yeah.
that a little bit better, but hopefully, maybe we even do it together, not on East Coast West Coast mode, but everything on the West Coast because we know the weather is better here. It's actually not, but don't tell Rick. All right, let's get it started. What is Cursor SH? How
So
do you
yes.
explain it?
Yeah, so Cursor has kind of become my de facto editor, my favorite editor. Besides NeoVim, because no, I'm just kidding. Uh, um, so it's a VS Code fork. It's basically VS Code. So like if you download it, you can literally import all your VS Code stuff, and it works just like you're used to working in VS Code. So there's really no difference there. But what they do is they edit enough, or they change enough of the UI and the experience that VS Code doesn't let you change via plugin extension. Um, just to add that extra level of finesse that makes sense for an AI workflow. Like you're using AI to help you do things. And VS Code, it's just not quite there. Like Copilot, GitHub Copilot's amazing. It's great. You can use GitHub Copilot with this, obviously, because it's a VS Code fork. But they just add an extra layer of things that you can do that it's just you can't do in VS Code. I'll show you some of that later. Some people are going to see it and go, "Well, no, you can do that in Copilot," but it's like it's just a little different. It,
Okay.
um, yeah.
We're here to talk about those differences. So extensions are all the same. Basically, an extension that works for VS Code should work with Cursor SH because it's just another. It's added functionality, right? Like they're not forking from VS Code, where adding, let's say, merging new changes from VS Code into Cursor is a big deal, right? They're kind of like building on top of it all the core, which means it's still an Electron app. It's probably running, I believe, Node somewhere underneath. So all of that is the same. Obviously, it
Mhm.
has Git integration. It has search. It has very similar look and feel. I'm looking at it right next to the screen when I'm looking at you. It's a little bit more. I would say, I guess I have the dark team, but it's a little bit more flat, I would say, and it's a little more compact on the sidebars, at least by default. I don't think I did any customizations to it. Um,
Mhm.
I do notice on the bottom right that it says Copilot plus plus, and you were talking about like GitHub Copilot. What's the deal there? What's the difference?
So they do some things a little different. They have their own models for certain things. So like Copilot, you know how like in GitHub Copilot you're typing and it tries to look ahead and figure out what you're trying to do, and it gives you like this. Maybe it's a function. You start typing a React component or something, and then it's like, oh, you're wanting to do this, and it fills
Yes.
out like 10 lines or 20 lines or whatever of code. Copilot Plus Plus is really smart where as you're coding, let's say you start coding inside a function, it'll go through and it knows, oh, on line 5, you probably also want to do this. And line 10, you probably want to do this. So it's like this multi-line thing where it's not just like one big block. It can intelligently jump across a bunch of stuff. It's really handy, like writing SQL. I was rewriting some SQL the other day, and it knew what I was trying to do, and it jumped like 10 lines down to the where clause and went ahead and changed that too, based on what I was changing up here. So that's where some of their specialty comes in, is doing that kind of stuff, if that makes sense.
Okay, I get it.
We can play with
So
it.
it's
I'll
not the
show you.
same Copilot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not the
it's not the
same
same.
Copilot plus plus than GitHub Copilot. Okay.
Right. Yeah, you can run most of the
Um,
time, like if you don't do Copilot Pilot Plus Plus, you can run GitHub Copilot and still use Cursor with some of the features that they have. But as soon as you want to use some of their special stuff, then you need to use the plus plus thing. It's pretty cool.
which at that point, why do you want to use Cursor.sh if you're just going to use the standard VS Code set of features, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can show you a couple examples where maybe you would want to, but yeah, it's less of an attraction for sure.
Okay, fair enough. So you mentioned you can, or the other thing that I saw on the settings, I think you mentioned about their custom model, but then you can also bring your OpenAI key or your Azure Open API or Azure
Yeah.
key or your cloud key. What's the deal with, or you can pay for Cursor Pro, which gives you all the AI features. What are some of the trade-offs of Cursor Pro versus kind of like this BYOK, bring your own key approach that
Bring
they
your
also
own
offer?
key. I love that actually. That's great. Um, so yeah, what's great about Cursor is you don't have to buy their Copilot Plus Plus plan. You can just drop in your OpenAI API key. Well, that's a mouthful. Um, and use a lot of their AI features, which are really just UI and UX. UX really, the experience is better in Copilot and Cursor, I think. Um, but you can just use your own OpenAI key, and then you're paying on a consumption based model, right? So depending on how much you use it, if you decided to use GPT-4 versus Turbo versus 4.0, um, depending on what you use, it might be cheaper than most of the tools. It kind of just depends.
Okay. All right. So basically, Cursor Pro is unlimited, where versus bring your own key, you're kind of limited by those keys and whatnot. And I guess having your own key means that you can use it here, but then you can also use it for some other things. Versus Cursor Pro is just for Cursor, right? That's another
Mhm.
trade-off. So, which again, $20 or whatever, I don't think it's that much for all the benefits that you get of having a coding assistance. All right, so why don't you start sharing some of that and let's say that we want to, either you or me, we want to build a new personal website, right? So, and we start exploring some of these things and some of these unique differentiators from VS Code and see what the big deal is about.
Okay, cool. You see my screen?
I do now.
Okay, cool. So, all right, where do we start? Let me just create a little bun project real quick. So I'm going to open up the terminal. Again, like you'll see, this is just basically VS Code. It's the same thing, right? What's cool
Hmm.
is all of the things that you can do in the editor, you can do in the terminal. So like, you know how GitHub Copilot, they added that CLI command. I can't remember what it was called. Is it like GCH something? And you ask a question that tells you what the command is. I don't know if you've seen that in the CLI, but anyway, you don't have to do that here. You can literally hit Command K. You'll see here at the bottom, it opened up like the cursor interface. And I can be like, start a new bun project and then just hit enter. It's going to quickly go through. I'm using GPT-4, which is the slowest one. And there you go. There's the bun create, um, which, yeah, I needed the template. So we're just going to say Is that right? Is that bun create? I don't know what the templates are. Isn't there
Maybe
an init as well? Yeah, here you go. We're gonna do init.
there you go.
Um, blah blah blah. Boom. Okay. So anyway, that little interface down there, you'll see this in a minute inside the code, but you can do that inside your terminal, which is pretty cool. So you can actually select stuff if you see an error, and then hit Command K, and then tell it what does this mean or what's it doing or whatever. You can also pick um, your different models too if you're so inclined, which is kind of cool.
Do you have a preference on the bubbles? Why do you why would somebody want to change some of those models based on your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So GPT-4, I guess, in recent history is has like the best reasoning and logic there, but it's slow and it's expensive. 4.0 is the new one that just came out, and it's almost, I guess it's as good as what everybody says. I don't know. I've seen GPT-4 be a better reasoning still, so I kind of question some of that.
Mm-hmm.
But in a lot of cases, if you just want something really fast, the GPT-5 is what you would use. And then Cursor has their own Cursor Small, which is pretty good too. So those are really, really fast. Like if you're trying to generate a bunch of code and it's not that complex, if you use one of those, oh my goodness, it's like it just spits it out instantly.
Yeah, so you basically you're trading reasoning capacity for speed by switching these models. That or is that a good way to put
Yeah.
it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
All right.
Um, I just blew up my screen a little bit. Is it better? Is it easy to read?
I think
Making
it
it?
is.
Yeah, just
Yes.
plus it. Okay. All right, cool. Um, all right, so let's do a couple things. Let's just write a function real quick. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead. It's funny. Look at that. It already knows I should. Yeah, yeah, sure. Let's do that. No, let's do like I don't know, Fibonacci function. Let's just generate that real quick. And this is very similar to Copilot. I'll show you some differences in a minute. So you see how it did that, and then I can
Yeah.
hit Shift Command K to do follow up instructions, and then like, oops, I hit the wrong button. I guess I was supposed to be in this thing, wasn't I? Oh, it's already there. So then, like that's kind of stupid, but you kind of get the point. You can like um, do. There you go. There's the follow up. Boom, boom, boom. Ready to go. Hit Command Enter to accept it, and then boom, we're good. So that's like the real simple example. You can select stuff, and you can hit Command K, and then you get like this little editor up here again with the model. What's neat is if I wanted to change this, this is a really trivial change I'm going to do, but like if I let's see here, rename this to Cesar. It's stupid, I know. Like I realized, this, but this is what I want to show you. See what it did? It went through here and renamed it in the recursive part,
Yep.
um, but it gave you a diff of what it's suggesting versus what it was there before,
Mm-hmm.
which I really like this. And I also like it in line like this. You can individually click yes or no, or you can just accept the whole thing. But I like it in line like this. Copilot, GitHub Copilot just recently added this, I don't know, several months ago, a few months ago. But it's kind of clunky how they do it. I don't know. There's a little bit of a UX here with Cursor that's just a little bit better,
Yeah, it works with
which is
your
kind of cool.
brain more like a yeah, I see what you're saying. It's a little yeah, it's subtle, but that was what makes a product better or worse for you. So that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, so like the diff in GitHub Copilot defaults to the two, the side by side diff, and in some cases it's really hard to like wrap your head around. It's like I just want to see how it's changing each line. I don't want to see it like this is this and this is this over here, and like you have to do it yourself.
Yep.
Um, how do I run this? Is it bun start or bun run? Bun, just bun, right? Well, I don't remember. Let's see. How do I
Yeah, why don't we ask
run
the GPT-4 model?
index.ts? Oh, I'm doing the wrong thing here. Hold on.
Hey, it always
Clear,
goes like
clear.
that when you're sharing your screen and you're kind of like your hands go to the wrong keys on the keyboard. So don't worry.
Right, always, always. Run index.ts with bun. It should be bun. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. So then we're gonna run that baby. Boom. Oh, I didn't save it. Okay, that's cool. Right. So then you just run that again. There's your Fibonacci. So we're up and running, baby.
Yeah.
Okay, so does that make sense with the Command K? That's kind of nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go back to the history. As soon as you hit Command K, if you want to go through your history, you can see what I did and then rerun it if I want to. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, so now let's do this. Let's eliminate this for a second, and then I want to generate a JSON object with first and last names of 10 random people. So I'm just gonna set this up because I'm going to show you what it's like to edit a bunch of things at once. Hopefully this will work. I'm just doing this all ad hoc, so like no idea.
Yep.
Hey, oh look at all the tech people, including John and Jane. That's kind of funny. Okay, all right, there you go. So yay, we've got people, right? But let's say I
Mm-hmm.
want to change first name to just name. So it's obviously really easy. Just change it, right?
Yeah.
If I go down here, it's going to start noticing it. Name. And see off to the right here, what it's
Uh-huh.
suggesting? Oh, you want to do that everywhere. Let me hit tab. What's this thing going? Hold on. Yeah, there. See that? Hit tab. So that's what some of that Copilot Plus Plus is doing, where it kind of sees ahead and it'll change stuff automatically. It really, really stands out when you're doing, I mean, this is JSON objects, so it's kind of obvious, but when you're doing like SQL or things where there's like logically this and this are tied together, and it'll look through the whole function or the whole SQL thing or whatever, and it'll go, oh, you probably want to change this over here too. So you hit tab once and it changes it everywhere. It's pretty cool.
So starts to detect a changing sequence, right? You're renaming a field all over the place, or you are changing the logic or some of your constraints, and it kind of like understands that piece and keeps adding it to it. In like it doesn't, how do I explain it? It's not like a question and answer kind of thing or like a request and response. It's more like, hey, are you trying to do this, and kind of like helping with that. Okay, I see it.
Right. So like here's a perfect example. So see how I changed it to first, and now you notice the thing over here that is suggesting is not only first, but hey, you probably mean last over here then, not last name. You see how it's
Mm-hmm.
doing that? So if you
Yep.
accept it, you can hit tab to accept it, and then boom. So it kind of logically sees that. Pretty cool.
Yeah, have you noticed there? Like, it seems like the model is not taking your full array; it's taking the names that start with a J, and those are the ones that are suggested to be changed. And then
Hmm.
I think once you get into Steve, then it says, "Oh, you want to change all of them, right?" And now it
Yeah,
takes another
exactly.
batch. It's like it's interesting. Like it's not changing the 10 records. You still have to do a couple of tries, um, but yeah, I
Yeah,
see
and
what it is
usually
saying.
how it works, like I had that IntelliSense thing interfering, but usually how it works is you hit tab and it'll change those, and then it'll suggest it again here. You hit tab, it'll change those, and so you kind of have to hit tab a couple times as you're walking
Okay.
down the thing. That's usually what happens. Not always, but usually.
Yeah. Okay. I think it can, if it changes a lot of lines at the same time, you get more risk of hallucination of a change. Where here it's
Right,
like reinforcing that change in a way that it just keeps going.
right, right. Yeah. So, So that's an example of that kind of multi-line cursor thing, which is really cool. Then another thing you can do is you can so there's the Command K thing I showed you, but there's also Command L, or you can click the little button over here, I guess. But if you hit Command L, like in this case, I selected all the code and hit Command L, and then it brings out this chat thing. GitHub Copilot does something very similar, and then you can ask anything about it, or you can even tell it, I want it to do this, I don't want it to do this, whatever. You just kind of have a chat, typical chat.
Yeah.
I want name to be in all the properties. Um, something like that. And so it'll do the kind of typical chat thing that everybody's used to.
Yeah.
And it didn't do a good job of it. Way to go, ChatGPT 4. To modify keyword so that each object has a name property. Right?
Oh,
Oh,
it's
that
actually,
that's
yeah.
so funny. I see what it's doing. Oh, it's like coalescing the two. Okay, well, whatever. That's not
I
what I
mean,
want, but that's fine.
but it is technically what you ask, right? Like you
It's
have a
true.
first, you have a last, and you're asking for a name, and it's understanding a full name, and it's just computing that for you. There you go.
100%. But then
Asks
you
better
click
questions.
apply. Yeah, 100%. Click apply. Boom. There it is. Here, I'll close the side panel. And then it shows you the diff. And you're like, okay, that diff is good. Boom, let's go. Let's go.
Okay.
Cool, right?
Yeah, pretty cool. So that's Inlay AI, that's Sidebar AI. I think the GitHub chat, the GitHub Copilot chat is on the left, like here's on the
Yeah,
right, which I think it kind of makes sense because the other one feels like it's just another extension on your screen. And to be honest, it's 2024. We have big screens, so we can have two sidebars. So we don't have to cram everything onto one, or at least that's the default, right? I'm pretty sure you can customize it. All right.
right.
What
So
else?
let me show you a couple other cool things with this sidebar. So I'm back in the sidebar. I've said, hey, this is my contact. Actually, you know what? Let me do this again. Let me select the whole thing. I've said that this is my context again. Let's create a new one. Sorry. Um, so there's a couple things. Again, same thing. You can pick your model and stuff. But there's a couple interesting things. You can drop in an image. So like if you have a screenshot of um, a table, for example, Excel table or whatever, you can drop it in there and say, I want to create a JSON structure or a SQL structure based on this. Kind of cool. This is interesting. Meant to click the down arrow. So you see the search behaviors here and its embeddings and re-ranker. So
Mm-hmm.
there's some interesting things that go on behind the scenes that they give you that they kind of give you a little extra control and power over than I think GitHub does or GitHub Copilot does. So for example, if you click the settings here, this is the cursor settings. You can create your rules like always like this is always use function or react and there's a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, um, and then there's your models. The let's see, where's it at? Here it is. This code, there's a bunch of extra features here. I'm not going to talk about all those right now, but this code base indexing. So it goes through and indexes your code, your whole project. In this case, I only have one file. And it creates embeddings for it. And so when you're doing your search or you're saying I'm trying to do this with this, it includes your code base in context. So it tries to grab in the window of context and the size that it has. It tries to stuff in there things related to what you're asking about or trying to do, so that your code base is always in context, which is really cool.
Yeah. So it's not just a, I don't want to say simple, but like just plain RAG, but this is more like those embeddings get created. There is some backdoor search going on in there that like in
Right.
your code that makes it a little bit more smart than your typical just context or RAG, right? Okay,
Exactly. Yep.
makes
And
sense.
then in addition to that, you see this here. I've got Alicia JS and Drizzle ORM, the docs. You literally can just go add new doc, paste in the beginning of a document page. Like let's say it's bun, for example. Maybe we should do bun actually. And it'll index those document pages. And so then again, same thing, just like your code base, if it's related to Drizzle or Alicia in this case, or if I add bun, if it's related to that, it'll bring that into context while it's providing the answers, which is really cool. And the way that works is um, so the way that works is let's create a new one. You can say at. And so you see how I have files, folders, code, web, doc, git, code base. So that's like you can set the context. I only want it to be these files, or I'm only talking about this code or this website, include this website, for example. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
But if I did
So
docs,
this could be something like you can add, like, let's say you're new with Tailwind CSS, right? So you can not only add the Tailwind CSS docs into the context, but also when you're making a request saying, "Hey, I want to style it in this format," right? So you combine not just your code base, but the Tailwind CSS docs, and also and also in the context you're saying, hey, I'm talking about like styling or CSS or whatnot. So that's pretty cool.
yep, exactly. So like in this case, I've already indexed Drizzle because I use the Drizzle ORM. If people aren't familiar with it, it's like Prisma. It's a database ORM in JavaScript. Well, or ORM is it's like a query builder. ORM's maybe too heavy-handed. It's a query builder. But anyway, what I did was I included that in this. I said create a Drizzle schema based on the people JSON. Um, so you could tell it went through and kind of like, okay, this is the context I have for Drizzle. Um, and then here's what it did. It just spat out. Um, so it's using PG, so Postgres, because I didn't tell it to use SQLite. Um, and then it just created that schema. Boom, there it is.
So you have the two options there if you wanted to do SQLite, right? You can make it on the chat request, or you can put on your settings and say, hey, when using Drizzle RM, I want you to always use Postgres or SQLite or something, right? Like
E-
that.
exactly. Yep, you 100% could do that. Yep. There, and I just fixed it to be SQLite.
Yeah, if you're, I guess, like you, Rick, you experiment with a lot of frameworks and a lot of different technologies, so you don't really have those settings IDE wise, or maybe workspace wise. But if somebody's like just, let's say, married to one particular framework or language, you can put that as your default. So your queries are smaller because you always have the same stack. If that makes
Yep.
sense.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. 100%. So anyway, kind of cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so another interesting thing on this sidebar, they have interpreter mode. Now, I will say I've actually never really used this before, but interpreter mode will attempt to run things that you ask it to do. So if I click interpreter mode and I say, I don't know, what can we do with this people array? Um, let's see here. Output the last name of every other index. Let's see what happens. I have no idea how this is going to work, but it's supposed to execute. Uh, oh, yeah, you can tell it's trying to execute it via Python IDE. All right, what's going to happen? So it's executing it. I don't know what it's exactly doing. I've never really used this before, but no, it will contain the last name.
Why did it went
Okay.
through Python? If
I
that,
think because the code interpreter in OpenAI, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what Cursor is doing under the covers for it. I assume they're using the interpreter mode in the OpenAI's APIs.
yeah, huh.
It did change this though, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe if it's running code, like maybe you can have it run something and then take the output of what you just ran and then have it do something else. Maybe. I don't know. I've never tried it,
Mm-hmm.
really explored it. But that's what that interpreter mode is. Um, it seems cool. I just haven't had a need to use it yet.
To use it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
So I think that's it for the sidebar. Again, like you can add your context this way, which is kind of cool. I've used the code base. I've used a Git repo. I've pointed to it. I'm like, look, I'm trying to do something with this. How do I use this with this guy's library? He doesn't have a doc site or docs. He doesn't have a website, blah blah blah. But he has a GitHub repo. You point right to it. Pretty cool. You can do it
How
with these.
long does it take to index some of those things?
I mean, it depends on the size and what you're trying to do. It seems like Cursor has this automatic cutoff where they're like, all right, I'm not going to crawl any further than, this many pages. I don't know if there's a setting somewhere where you can change it. I haven't seen it, but it seems like at some point there's a cutoff.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So in the context of the models, right? Like you mentioned, there's a cursor small, which is like, I guess, a very specialized model for code generation, right?
Hmm.
Uh, well, and maybe you don't know this. I'm just wondering here, but like, why don't we have like models tailored to a particular language, as opposed to just code generation? I don't know if there's value in like, hey, having a cursor small for Swift or for Python or for TypeScript, and just make it even smaller, but always with that context of the language. I don't know. That seems like an idea to try. Maybe it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's interesting. Um, you probably could. I don't know. Hmm.
Like a very specialized, I'm sure, like this is June 11th, so Apple just announced, I guess, Xcode with like AI, Apple Intelligence or whatever. um
Right. Yeah.
so and we all know that Xcode is only used for like Swift, and maybe open a random XML file by mistake or something, right? So I don't know if they're doing some sort of model that it is specialized on Swift and Objective-C, or they just use kind of like a LLM that includes just coding in general. I guess we'll have to try that out sooner rather than later. But I was just wondering about that. That seems like a use case
Yeah.
where you want to explore more. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I assume a lot of it can be covered with like the codex models and some of these other models that are just like large LLMs for coding. But I guess if you had like, let's just say you created a language called Cesar lang. Um, and so that's not going to exist, right, in the big, large model. But you could fine tune it. You could create a layer on top that has those things. And so then when in the when you're using the model, it would know, oh, this is related to Cesar lang or whatever, and then that model's knowledge would be used. So
Agree.
the fine tuning is pretty common, I think, in some of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm you gotta make a better job to sell it to me, but I'll try it, and I'll try it in a context of a couple things that I need to do. So I see like I really like the think ahead, or like identifying the pattern of changes that you want to do. Um, but it's like any other IDE, I guess, where you got to spend some time learning the IDE and learning what makes it unique. It's not just the font, it's not just the speed of the IDE, but
Hmm.
there's also functionality that you need to learn or relearn, in every IDE. And I see the benefits of this. I do think that if I get to try it, I'll probably go with the Cursor Pro, because bringing your own key, it seems like that key is going to have limits, and you can hit it pretty quick, especially if you're learning the IDE. So maybe that's a trade-off that I'm willing to make. But I mean, this is good. I like it. How long have you been using Cursor.sh?
Since it came out, honestly, as soon as it came out, I tried it. I'm like, oh, this is no brainer. it's VS Code. That's what I use is VS Code for the most part. So um, there was really no switching cost for me, honestly. Um, it's not really that big a deal. I've heard a couple people say, yeah, but the problem is I have my VS Code settings synced, and which this is true by the way. For whatever reason, the VS Code like Cursor doesn't sync with the VS Code remote settings. Where I don't know if GitHub does that or Microsoft does that, but there must be some barrier where the forks aren't allowed to use that, and so your Cursor settings won't sync. But here's the thing though is or this VS Code slash Cursor, same thing. You can export your settings. So like when I moved to another computer that I bought, I just exported my settings and sent it there and it works fine. So the only time you get out of sync is like if I install an extension over there and it's not on this one, you know, not a big deal.
So but you can import, like I think I got a prompt saying you can import your extensions from your local VS Code, right? So you can
Yes.
import a
Yes.
lot of that and then you can export it, but it has to be manual. That seems like a good opportunity to build some sort of syncing service for Cursor, and maybe for them or maybe open source or something, but a way for you to sync maybe some sort of plugin that syncs with your own Git repo or something.
Yeah,
That'll be
it's
nice.
not hard. Yeah, it's not hard. And it's not that big a deal, honestly. It's really not. At first, I'm like, oh no, it doesn't sync. And it's like, it really hasn't mattered at all.
Yeah.
So,
Is this so because this VS Code, is this like Mac only, or did they also have like a Windows version? Do you know?
that is a good question. I assume it works on Windows. Yeah, actually, yes, it does. It does work on Windows. I don't know
Okay.
if it works on Linux. Um,
VS Code
but
does, so maybe like electronic apps
right,
do work. So I was
seems like
just
it should.
it's
Yeah.
interesting because I'm looking at their website and they don't mention anything, or like they mention the features, but it's, let's see, docs,
The website's kind of
microservice.
bare bones.
It's
Here's
very,
the deal. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff. Like if you follow their Twitter account and you see some of the things they're doing and some of the problems they're trying to solve, it's really cool stuff. But it never comes across from their website or their change log or anything that it's just, I think all of that is like just not their focus. Which is kind of unfortunate because what they're doing is amazing. It's just it's not really clear how cool um, their product is really like from their marketing side. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Like the PR portion, like they're so focused on the work that they forget that like they have champions like you that really like it and like are willing to spend 40 minutes with me like walking through some of those features, but that doesn't really it impacts maybe our audience and some of our friends and whatnot, but it's not like super
right?
broad, right? Like it's a PR opportunity, which I guess is a friction if we go back to our principles, right, for spread of a new product. And sometimes that's what you need to make it popular and to get some funding and whatnot. So yeah, something to keep in mind. I'm not following them, but I will certainly do. I also see that they have a Discord forum, and there's doing a bunch of stuff. Okay, nice. Anything else you want to talk about it?
I know I'm missing some stuff. I just can't think off the top of my head what it is. It's definitely handy. Maybe the downside, maybe I should bring that up on the downside is, and this is not cursor specific, but this is just using these AI coding helpers, is I have noticed myself pausing and like I'm in the middle of coding, I'm kind of grooving, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I just need to, my brain's moving faster than my hands are, and
Yeah.
and then I'm like, I start typing. I'm like, I wonder what the AI is going to say to do, and it suggests something. So I catch myself pausing a little bit, and I'm like, oh, that's not right. No, blah, blah, blah. Or oh, that's interesting. Let's try that. Oh, that's not right. Oh, I got to fix this one thing. So I've noticed that in some cases, these AI coding things that do that um, kind of inhibit the flow of thought, if that makes sense. Um,
Does it make you like, are you curious about what they are going to suggest, or are you kind of like hesitant? They're kind of like, what if I didn't think of, like, I don't know, an edge case or something? Like what's that reaction for you?
I think it's two things. The first one is that initial, like, I start coding and it's like that kind of little bit of a, I don't know, it's like a dopamine hit or that like little bit of a, like the TikTok addiction is like, what really is the next video? What's the, like, I
Hmm.
want to see what it says. I know what I want to code, but I just want to see what it says. And you kind of just wait. Oh, okay. No, not that. Um, so that's the first part. And the second part is, um, I have gotten bit many times from specifically Copilot Plus Plus, but specifically Cursor's thing where the multi-line change, where it suggests stuff and I can kind of see it's like, okay, generally that's all right. Okay, let's hit tab. And then one of the things I missed and it changed it, or it literally flipped the logic when I didn't want it to flip the logic or something. And because it was doing 10 lines at a time and not in a row, like one here, one here, one here, one over here inside this function, it's generally right, but that one time it just does a bit flip or something, and it's like, why isn't my code working? Well, who did that? Why would they put a bang right here? This is not a knot. This is a like why? And it's because of that. That's gotten me in trouble several times. So I have found myself turning off that advanced IntelliSense, that code hinting thing when I'm in a flow because I don't want to be interrupted. I know exactly what I'm coding and I get better outcomes that way, even if I could have hit tab a couple times and it stub it out. Which is different, by the way, than when you hit, like when I was showing you Command K, you're in the coding thing, you're like, select all this Command K, do this. Or hit Command L, the sidebar comes open, and hey, I'm trying to do this. That's different because I'm opting into that
Yeah.
versus the stuff that fills in your editor. You're not really opting into it. You don't get a choice. It's going to try to tell you what to do, whether you want to it or not.
Yeah, I have run into the same kind of thing where I have to turn it off. Like at the beginning, I thought, I was like, why would I turn this off? But yes, it messes with your brain in different ways. And sometimes you overtrust it. Sometimes you, I don't know, like you don't validate some of that stuff. Sometimes you're like mad because you got it wrong, and you're like, no, 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 that's not what I wanted to do. Or then you're thinking more in how do you write the prompt versus how do like you writing the code. And to be honest, that removes some of the fun on why I got into programming. Like I didn't get
Yeah,
into programming to write the perfect prompts, right? Like I like to argue with ChatGPT, but like with like GitHub Copilot, I wanted to just get it. I don't want to think too much about what I'm asking because that time can be used for code writing. So I don't know.
yeah.
I feel like similar problems there. So okay, all right. Hey, thank you. This was good. This is a good walkthrough of some of those features. I can tell you at the beginning, I was like, I downloaded. I tried a couple of times for a couple of episodes when we create the markdown and we publish it and whatnot. But I didn't see some of those things, and on purpose, I stay away from the docs since we talk about like, hey, why don't you walk me through it? So I do appreciate it. I mean, I use VS Code. Like as you said, you have really nothing to lose to try it out. But we'll see what happens, and maybe in the future I'll report back on what's going on.
Do it. That's great. Yeah.
All
Cool, man.
right, all right. I guess we'll be back with some conference content, some of those learnings and whatnot, different subjects. But until then, we will see you next time. Thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you, Rick.
Yep. See you later.
All right.